Veronica Paz Wells, Charlie, Sowers of Life. Prologue. From the moment we assume conscious dissatisfaction with a life full of uncertainties, where the horizon looks cloudy, without clear hope, and at the brink of an ever more frightening future, we begin searching for a reason that will allow us to choose and plausibly justify our efforts and sacrifices for a continued existence. This pathetic present condition we live in provokes us to obsessively pursue the answers to innumerable questions related to the purpose of life and its trials and challenges. For we stubbornly insist on staying alive and assuring our survival at any price, sometimes without knowing why. To this day, in order to participate in the context of life and in the search for understanding the macro powers that govern us, we have counted only on tools that are tied to the vices of the establishment, becoming accomplices in the traps that lead nowhere and that delude the unwary and desperate, who persist in trying to achieve their dreams and promises of happiness through an unconditional surrender to the values and demands of a senseless system. But now, in this scenario, an opportunity to escape from these deceits and traps appears, presenting a limitless source of answers that are not misleading or influenced by unilateral interests. The contact with civilizations of an extraterrestrial origin emerges as a gigantic hope to realize previously impossible dreams, a means of direct access to a radical transformation and the epitaph of a dated era. However, I wonder if at present we have the structure or capacity to understand everything that will be revealed to us and that we will discover during this fantastic process of extraterrestrial contact. All of us hold a certain amount of knowledge acquired throughout our lives. Principles, patterns, social rules, acquired behaviors, good or bad, are part of the reality of our lives. All that processed information representing basic elements in the structuring of our personality and character is limited, partial, and incomplete, as is usual amongst humans. Each one of us states his vision of himself, of the world, and of the people around us, but is it a true vision? I wonder whether our basis is solid and sound. The objective answer is no. Our knowledge of things is partial, for the information and experience of life we have is limited by our opportunities. To better understand what I'm trying to say, let's remember the story of the three blind men who came across a huge elephant while walking along a road. One of them, touching the trunk, innocently explained to his companions that the animal was shaped like a long tube, thicker at the top than at the bottom, and that it was extremely flexible. The other, who touched the tail, said he was wrong, and affirmed that the animal was shaped like a thick, frayed rope with a tuft of hair on the tip. But the third vehemently denied his friend's statements, for he was touching a huge, strong foot, and he said that according to him it was not shaped as they had described it, but felt exactly like the trunk of a tree. In that silly, ordinary example, who was telling the truth? Which of the three blind men was right? Whom should we trust? As we can see, nobody has a complete vision of everything and never will. That is why we are so different. Even so, every human being egotistically thinks that his is the utmost maximum knowledge and information. Each believes he owns the absolute, naked, total truth, the best and only perception of the universe around him, when in reality he grasps just an insignificant fraction of a bigger whole. This situation prevents us from not only having a more intimate, deeper relationship with other human beings, but also from having a better comprehension of ourselves and of our role in this small planet in the universe. Unfortunately, nowadays, we do not trust anything anymore. This is why we drastically reinforce our seclusion, delving constantly inward in the search for a sense of life and a better, clearer perception of things. But to our total despair, clear perception never comes, or at best is only roughly outlined. We can never feel or see with complete clarity. All we get in the end is an increase of egotism and the disintegration of our personality as we become progressively more alienated from the others, hiding an afflicting craving for survival that separates us from the true reason for life. To be able to understand what we really are, why we live, and what lies ahead for us in the universe, we must understand that life and the interrelationship between beings, here or anywhere in the cosmos, are different to how we usually see or interpret them. Out there, everything occurs according to rules and principles unknown to us. We do not know them or do not understand them because we are confined to a world where everything is stipulated and defined according to ideological interests and megalomaniacal ambitions that insensibly subdue the legitimate rights and requirements of the human being. Inwardly, humanity continues to serve a few, feeding back a servility that stretches through the centuries. Nowadays, even those few who have always been the dominating class do not understand the true meaning of things because they also have been conditioned for generations, so they have become slaves of their own ambitions, limitations, and weaknesses. In this world, we seem to blindly obey social conventions settled into over time. Fashion, religion, philosophy, ideology, habits, and customs are the reflection of the cultural reality of a people or a nation, but these aspects which identify them are not necessarily the appropriate ones, the ones that should be in accordance with their best way of living. It should be pointed out that the current system in our world, ingrained in our daily routine, was obtained by differentiated historical processes. Wars, social conflicts, revolutions, industrialization, and commerce established the building of structures that were organized, institutionalized, and became the guiding laws for millions of human beings. Very rarely did men plan and develop systems or structures that were in tune with their true necessities. The great majority were the senseless result of other imposed systems, or else they served unilateral purposes, carrying the ballast of previous vices and conditionings. The course of the dominant robotic machine of power and competition was deterred only on very few occasions in order to satiate man's real yearnings. What happened in most cases was the superficial change of the factors of submission and the rules of the game. In the fight for survival and power, the worst enemy remained man himself. Finally, the history and events that ensued were motivated by ideological, economic, religious, racial, paternalistic, or autocratic interests, which strengthened still further the mechanism of alienation, and along the way consolidated a terribly strong, self-sustaining, oppressive structure. The ones who opposed it were virtually isolated and forsaken mercilessly. Around 1951, a great thinker and researcher called Erich Fromm wrote in his book, The Forgotten Language, "Human beings need and depend on each other, but up to now, history has been influenced by only one fact. Material production has not been sufficient to satisfy the true necessities of men." He goes on, "The elite, forced to control the non-chosen, became prisoners of their own restrictive tendencies. Therefore, the human spirit, both of dominator and dominated, is deviated from the essential human purpose, which is to think and feel humanly, to use and develop his faculties of reasoning and love inherent to man, and without which his total development is." In this process of deviation and deformation, the human character is distorted. The prevailing objectives are those opposite to the interests of the true inner man. His potential for love is impoverished, and he is compelled to wish to have power over others. His self-assurance diminishes, and he tries to find compensation through an unquenchable thirst for fame and prestige. He loses his sense of dignity and is forced to become a merchandise, trying to find self-respect through his success and by selling himself. Another writer, thinker, and spiritualist, John Baines, wrote in his book, The Stellar Man, "Deprived from the superior possibilities of the mind, man perceives in a very obscure way his own debility and impotence regarding destiny, death, illness, war, poverty, and dangerous changes. That is why he has always looked for leaders or governors whose strength would compensate for his weakness. Guided by desire, he invented gods to whom he attributes and begs the power and strength he lacks. All the structures of our civilized world are based on the total weakness, cowardice, impotence, ignorance, and uncertainty of the individual, who forges collective systems of protection, support, and control in order to compensate externally for his internal fragility." The synthesis of all this is that we must accept that in order to escape from this mental, ideological, and spiritual prison that daily stifles us, and in order to have the opportunity to discover life, it is necessary to reestablish a clear vision of things, chiefly regarding ourselves. But this will only be possible by substituting new conditionings acquired and realized through comprehension of the old ones, which were acquired through an osmosis induced by the environment. When we discover the fragility of the system we live in and intelligently begin to substitute more efficient, clearer values and archetypes obtained as a result of agreement with a universal reality for the values and archetypes conventionalized by culture and interest, we will be on the way to self-discovery. When in practice we begin to use the new values, those which will reflect knowledge, love, respect, and consideration, as well as organized common sense, and as a result we develop definite objective criteria of analysis, then we will finally be on the way to our irresistible inner transcendence. Man will leave his cocoon of transformation and become a cosmic citizen when he learns how to live harmoniously with himself, how to understand the development of life, when he is able to look at himself impartially, without prejudice or bias, and when he realizes definitely the profound message of a leaf blowing in the wind. Then man will be able to feel the extension of his creative power, realize the constructive ability of his intellect, the beauty hidden in his feelings, the tender innocence of creatures, and come to the conclusion that he is not alone. Then he will fraternize with his fellow men, those who live in the jungle of the civilized world, to learn how to live, understand love, grow spiritually, and each day become more conscious, happier, and finally realize his potential. He will know that in this great, marvelous universe, he is not isolated or abandoned to his fate. Other brothers are waiting for him to share and struggle with him in order to build a greater universal happiness. In short, man will only transcend if he is willing to confront and question sincerely and honestly, and if he is ready to analyze, revise, and reformulate the image of himself, the world, the system around him, his beliefs, his objectives, knowledge, and basis. In summary, he will only be able to outlive himself and his cultural transition if he is firmly determined to understand life and undertake unconditional reorganization of the parameters and values that have guided his life up to now. He will find his way to infinity by restructuring himself internally, deeply, and radically. This is why this book is particularly directed to those who have not yet lost hope for growing mentally and spiritually, who still envision better days for man and the world, and who wish to conquer their inner world and become the people of tomorrow, sowing life in the garden of the universe.